Good morning, everyone. It's been a while since we've been together in person, in especially a meeting format in which we're able to see each other's faces and chat through the chat box, as well as unmuting ourselves. We've had some pretty controversial topics in the last few weeks. And so we were on a little bit of a lockdown with regards to our Zoom, but today is really a time for discussion. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ruby Nguyen. I know that we have visitors outside of the Division of Epidemiology and Community Health today. I know people are coming from across the university from our human rights program, as well as folks from the state health department and sectors that may be new to us in public health. And that's exactly what we want from a session like today. In fact, today is intentionally one of the times in which we have brought the community into us. So we truly are the Division of Epidemiology and Community Health today in that regard. We are so happy to have the following three speakers with us today. We will be hearing from Veena Iyer, Mark Wexler, and Sarah Culver. I'm going to go ahead and introduce all three of them at the same time so that will allow our transitions between their presentations to be a little bit more fluid. So let me begin with my dear friend Veena Iyer, who I've met Veena, can you believe it's been at least 5 years ago? Veena and I had worked on a legislatively mandated survey looking at the prevalence of violence against Asian women and children in the state of Minnesota. And Veena was in actually a very different type of law practice at the time, and she was doing our public health work on the side in her free time. So I knew that she was good folk even back then. So currently Veena is the executive director of the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota. Veena previously served as a shareholder in the Labor and Employment Group at Nealon Johnson Lewis. She serves on the Board of Regents at Augsburg University, is vice chair of the board of Portico HealthNet, and is also a member of the Community Advisory Council of Minneapolis, Federal Reserve's Opportunity and Inclusive Growth Institute. Veena is also a past president of the Minnesota Asian Pacific American Bar Association and a past board member of Minnesota Women Lawyers. So she's a busy lady. Mark Wexler and I go way back as well. Mark Wexler and I kind of grew up together, although I'm considerably older than he is. We are family friends. And had I known he was going to be so successful, I would have been even nicer to him when he was a kid. Mark is amazing. He is the co-founder of Not for Sale, a global anti-human trafficking nonprofit. As part of Not for Sale's business model, he helps conduct research and business development in at-risk communities, developing a holistic response to combat forced labor and modern-day slavery. In addition to Not for Sale, he's helped found enterprises such as Just Business, which is a social impact venture capital firm, Rebel, a beverage company available nationwide, and Krunam, an AI software company working to stop CSAM online, which is child sexual exploitation materials. And Dignida, which is a chain of brunch restaurants in the Netherlands, and many more. And last but not least is Sarah Culver, who I'm very delighted to have with us today because she is from the School of Public Health. She's in her final semester of the MHA program. Sarah worked at Health Partners for several years in a variety of different roles before she came back to school. She's interested in gaining more exposure to healthcare delivery and will be moving to Seattle following graduation to start an administrative fellowship at Swedish Medical Center in July. In her career, she hopes to be a part of the payment model reform to increase the affordability and accessibility of healthcare for all. So one of our wonderful students here in the School of Public Health. The order of speakers today will be Veena, followed by Sarah, who's been working with Veena, and then Mark will wrap it up. When Mark is done, we'll be open for conversation and discussion, and I really look forward to hearing about how you as an audience are interested in the overlap between our work in public health and their work. So take it away, Veena. So glad to have you.
Thank you so much, and it's so lovely to see you, Ruby, and to be invited to your community. I really, really appreciate it. So thank you so much to everybody for being here. This is a great, great crowd, and after all the Zoom fatigue, to have all of you decide that this is something that you want to learn about and to engage in is something that is really inspiring to me. As Ruby said, I'm the executive director of the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota, and I will share my screen to share some information with you about our work and about intersections with public health. And then I'll turn it over to Sarah, our fantastic intern who's working with us right now. So first, and this is where I always have the intro. Perfect. First, just to give you a little bit of a sense of ILCM. So the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota is a statewide immigrant legal services organization that has been in existence since 1996. So we just celebrated our 25-year anniversary last year. So the mission of ILCM is to provide legal services to Minnesota's immigrant and refugee communities, to open doors to opportunity, to prosperity, and to civic engagement. And so what is our work? It kind of falls into three main buckets. So our first bucket is legal services. So we assist folks with getting some certain forms of temporary status, such as deferred action for childhood arrivals for young people who have lived in the United States and gone to school here but don't have status. We assist, for example, refugees. Once they actually come here as refugees, we assist folks with getting green cards as well as citizenship. We also assist low-income community members with getting citizenship once they have a green card. We also do a lot of work with survivors of domestic violence, other violent crimes, as well as trafficking, with getting certain types of visas that they're eligible for based on their victimization and potentially cooperation with law enforcement with investigations of those crimes. So we assist those folks, and if they get those visas, that's also a pathway to getting a green card and citizenship. And then we also do a significant amount of work in immigration court for folks who are in deportation proceedings. And in that area, we primarily worked with people who are detained and then put into the immigration system, but we also do some work with folks who are in immigration proceedings but are not detained during the pendency of those proceedings. As I noted here, ILCM really is statewide, and we are physically located statewide. So our main office is here in St. Paul, and then we also have a satellite office at Neighborhood House in St. Paul, and then we also have offices in Moorhead, in Worthington, as well as in Austin, and really try to be very mindful of where we put our offices to really think about where is there a large number of immigrants and refugees, and where is there more limited services. So one thing you'll note, for example, is that central Minnesota area, like for example, St. Cloud, Willmar, which have very large immigrant populations, we don't have offices there. We serve folks from there, but our partner agency, Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid, they do immigration work and they're in those places. So we try, especially because there is much more demand for free legal services than there is supply, we really try to coordinate well with our partners to make sure that the way that we're all delivering services as a system is maximizing the availability of this very limited resource. So I wanted to let you know a little bit. I kind of gave you a sense of what kind of work we do. Oh, the one other thing I forgot to tell you is the other two things that we do, which are very important, which are outreach and education to make sure that folks understand the law and changes in the law. And then third, we do a lot of advocacy, particularly at the state level and the local level, but also at the federal level, to improve the immigration system and to, in what I describe as at the state and local level, try to make the gap between the experience of immigrants and refugees and citizens as small as possible. And that's by really advocating for the state to make changes to policy, for example, by providing driver's licenses for anybody, regardless of immigration status, that will really increase the availability of civil rights and privileges for immigrants and refugees. So that's a little bit about our work. Because I know that probably all of you have an interest in immigration, but might not be as familiar, I did want to make sure to give you a little bit. the immigration system is super complex, but often I want to give you a little bit of a sense of what I describe as the three cornerstones of immigration as it is in the United States, just so that you have a sense of how that framework works. And this is a system that frankly has evolved over time, but really was instituted in the mid 1960s. This system of immigration is what we have. And one of the issues is in the 1960s, right? In the 1960s, you had massive mainframe computers. We didn't have cell phones all of that time. That's the immigration system. That is the basis for our immigration system today. It's very, very, very outdated. But the system we have is effectively one in which the primary part of immigration is family-based immigration. And then there is employment-based immigration. So family-based, your family members are supporting you. Employment-based, an employer is sponsoring you to get your status. And humanitarian-based is really, for example, asylum. You're a victim of trafficking, you're a victim of a violent crime. Those are based on kind of your experiences and fears of going back to your home country or something that's happened to you here in the United States. So that's just a high level overview. As far as our work, we really work in the areas of family-based and humanitarian. We really don't do employment-based, though the funny thing is now we may end up doing a little bit on the intersection because with the folks who are coming in from Afghanistan, a lot of them are applying for what's called SIV visas or special immigrant visas that are based on the work that those folks did for the US government. So it's a weird kind of hybrid between employment-based and humanitarian visas. And part of what we're trying to figure out is kind of what our role is in that. So with that said, what I wanted to do, and actually before I go on, I don't know, Ruby, if there's any clarification questions that people have, please feel free to throw them in the chat and I will try to answer those clarification questions as I go on. And of course, there'll be time for greater discussion in a minute. So the last thing I wanted to do before turning it over to Sarah to talk about the great work she is doing with us is just to talk a little bit about that intersection between immigration and public health. And frankly, there are a ton of intersections. First is thinking a little bit about just the barriers to entry. If any of you are immigrants yourselves or know immigrants, you know that in order to come into the United States with lawful permanent resident status, there are medical exams that need to be taken. In certain cases, there might be medical waivers for certain conditions that you might have that might otherwise bar you from coming into the United States. Also, right now, a big point of discussion is something that you may have heard about called Title 42. It is something that was invoked at the beginning of the pandemic. It's a way to essentially have the CDC say there's a public health reason that we should restrict people from coming over the border into the United States because of the pandemic. And that has been used to keep out asylum seekers for the last 2 years. Lots of questions about whether there's really a legitimate public health basis for it. Also, during the Trump administration, there were some proposals about prohibiting folks from coming into the United States unless they already had access to health insurance. So again, lots of ways in which health is oftentimes used as a way to stop people from coming to the United States, though I think certainly some questions about whether those reasons are justified. Once people are here in the United States, it's also really important because there are legal restrictions on folks, particularly working class and low-income folks getting access to healthcare. One of those is that most lawful permanent residents, most green card holders, that's the common name, have a 5-year restriction on getting access to any type of public benefits, including medical cards. So that can be a real restriction. Additionally, there's there's a concept under immigration law called public charge, where folks who would be considered that they're going to be completely dependent on the U.S. government for benefits would not be able to, are not able to get green cards. The Trump administration tried to make that a lot more strict. That was rolled back through the courts and through the Biden administration. And just yesterday, because immigration law changes every day, there's actually efforts to return to a public charge rule that will clearly not take into account medical assistance in determining public charge. Then there's those practical barriers for folks who are low income and immigrants in getting access to the system, language barriers, health, you know, lack of understanding. But one thing I did think, and as I was getting ready for this, I was just looking at immigration and social determinants of health. One thing I did not realize is that actually, on average, immigrants have better health outcomes than native born folks. I didn't know that until probably yesterday. But what I think is it really addresses that issue of disaggregating data, because the problem is that that number takes into account, for example, my parents, all of those folks who are coming here on employment-based visas, who already have a great deal of privilege and support from their home countries coming in, but it also includes refugees, et cetera, who have all of these limitations at health. So I think that, I bet there is some work being done to disaggregate that, but I thought that that was really interesting. And then, of course, immigrations as providers of health. I mean, immigrants are who is keeping us healthy in this country, and especially going forward. And in fact, even today, there's some discussion at the Capitol about making it easier for immigrants to be able to provide healthcare in the US. So just a couple of ways in which there are intersections between our work. And I will very quickly tell a story that my staff just told me this morning. We have a grant through the Minnesota Department of Human Services to assist folks with getting immigration status, which would help improve their health care. We just assisted somebody who's an Indian citizen who was here just visiting her family, older woman, and then learned she had cancer and started getting assistance here. Doesn't have a basis for getting citizenship or a green card quite yet. But we were able to apply for her to get what's called humanitarian parole here in the US to continue her cancer treatment. And under Minnesota law and under Minnesota care, as soon as she gets her work authorization, she's going to be able to get on Minnesota care and get that support. So I think it was just serendipitous that our staff member was telling me about this morning, but really shows that link between getting health access and legal status. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to talk a little bit about the awesome work she's been doing with us in preparing for our strategic planning. So I'll turn it over to Sarah.
I'm getting a note that you have to, oh, there we go. It said you had to stop sharing. Do you mind? Okay. Let's see. That go through okay? So I'll just give a little background. As Ruby mentioned, I'm a MHA student, and I didn't have any prior experience with any immigration or legal, I guess, background, but I was connected through Veena and Ilcm through this management and technical assistance program. So I can just give a quick background on that. So it's a U of M program that pairs graduate students with local nonprofits and small businesses. And it's really a great benefit. The students gain valuable work experience and an opportunity to engage with the local community. And then the nonprofit orgs get about 60 to 80 hours of additional support to help with any projects. And in this case, I was enrolled in a strategic planning course in my MHA program, but I was hoping to get more real world experience. So I applied for the program, and based on ILCM's goals, that's how we got paired up together. So I've been working on the project since last September. ILCM is in the midst of strategic planning for 2022, and they asked for assistance completing a needs analysis. So I created and adapted a survey that was sent out to stakeholders that included working on getting clients, former clients, community orgs, elected officials, and then past staff and board members. So we're hoping to gain more information about stakeholders and all of these community members to inform strategic planning efforts and the initiatives for 2022 and moving forward. So this is just an example of some of the findings we had from the stakeholder survey. So we'll be preparing this in a kind of a primer report for the strategic planning committee and the board to review. So just sorted based on all of the stakeholders' answers to the survey. And these were the key takeaways we found. So we confirmed that the client's access services throughout all of Minnesota, and then additionally also in Western Wisconsin, North Dakota, and South Dakota. And the highest priority items were immigration protection for survivors of domestic violence or violent crime, deportation defense, citizenship, and employment authorization. And interestingly, we found there was also high demand for educational services from stakeholders, and that included community outreach and requests for more ethnic media appearances. So for a second semester, we're going to be doing an employee survey of ILCM staff, and then taking that data and comparing it with the stakeholder survey to see where that lines up, and hopefully getting some client survey results back. But there are some challenges with that. And then I'll be creating some background materials, and actually have the chance to participate in meetings to gain more real world experience with strategic planning efforts. So I'm really appreciative of Veena's willingness to work with me, even though I didn't have experience in this area, but I feel like a lot of what I was learning in my program really helped me work through this project. And that's about all I had, so.
Yeah, Sarah has been amazing, and we have been so lucky to have her. And I think, and that's the thing, right, is that you have to have experts from different areas. So yeah, Sarah didn't necessarily have a lot of information about immigration, but has picked up a ton. But what Sarah really knew is both thinking about surveys, how to administer them well, and then also thinking about strategic planning, which is the expertise we needed. And so it, I think, was just a really great win-win. So yeah, we're very appreciative. And I will turn it back over to you, Ruby, and to Mark.
Take it away, Mark.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Again, Mark Wexler, co-founder of Not for Sale. I'm going to share my screen here. Someone give me a thumbs up if it's good. Okay, thank you. So yeah, I appreciate you having me. Ruby, I'm realizing that I'm probably the oddest person in my family to be on this panel. I think I'm literally the majority of my close family are all in public health. So when I told them that I was going to be speaking here, they were like, "What? You what?"
Mark's dad was actually an assistant attorney general with Skip Humphrey during the big Minnesota versus Big Tobacco case. So yes, Mark has a long familial history of public health.
He did the fluoride case as well. There were some very interesting stories there. So yeah, it's so my family's like, wait a second, we should be the ones getting on it. So so thank you for having me. I have bragging rights now. I realized that in sharing about Not for Sale and our model and how we approach forced labor and human trafficking, that probably the easiest way in a quick 10-minute session is to share a story. So I'm going to share a story, have some pictures to illustrate how we've over the years evolved our model, because it is I think in the not only in the human trafficking, anti-human trafficking space, but overall in the NGO space, we have a pretty unique business model and impact model. So I'm just going to share a little story to illustrate how we got to where we are. First, it starts in California. I actually just moved back to Minnesota. I had been in the Bay Area for over 20 years in Silicon Valley. But in 1999, which was my first year in the Bay Area, on the front page of the San Francisco Chronicle was the shocking story about human trafficking in a restaurant in Berkeley, which I now own a home less than a mile from what was the front of a human trafficking ring that brought 850 women and girls from the Bangalore region of India. The restaurant was the front. The women were forced to work in the restaurant, and then from there sent out to fruits and vegetable fields, commercial sex trade, you name it, but the restaurant was the front. And to be honest, at that time, I was like, human trafficking? What the heck is that? Or even, what is this thing? Since then, I've been the worst Friday night wine party guest, because I'm the one that ruins the party. Because people go, what do you do? Oh, well, yeah, enjoy your wine. let's talk about slavery. From there, I would say the next 20 years of my life has been pulling the thread of how does that happen and what are the root causes that lead to 850 women and girls being trafficked and or trapped in forced labor around the world. And from there, my co-founder of Not For Sale and I, the reason why we started Not For Sale, because we met this incredible woman in Thailand, in the Golden Triangle region of Thailand. Her name is Krunam. And she had, when we met her, she had rescued 27 kids, had no plan, and had like a lean-to shed. I have one kid, I have no plan, and I have a house. And I can't imagine being in a situation where you have 27 kids and no plan. And so what we did was commit to her, and we're gonna help build one house. So Not For Sale started because we wanted to build one house for one person. That was gonna be it. And nope, as it were, you take one step, you continue to take many more steps. But she's really the heart and guiding force still to this day, is a part of all that we do at Not For Sale. Now there's an entire community where anywhere between 85 and 125 kids are under her care in the Golden Triangle region. We continue to support her financially and the work that she does there. But that work is the important work of working directly with survivors and people who are at extreme risk. And what we realized was that we were in a position, I'm going to back up, that we were in a position at our second project was very similar, working directly with survivors in Lima, Peru. And we had 100 kids in Lima that we were working with, providing shelter and support, holistic care, access to healthcare, mental health care. But the odd thing was that you just sit there, like, of these 100 kids, the vast majority of them are indigenous and they're from the Amazon, over 1,000 miles away. And it's just really the curiosity of trying to understand why why the kids are coming from so far away. And we were in a position to empower individuals like Krunam and Lucy in Lima, to people who are providing that direct support and that's service to survivors. We were in a position, my co-founder and I, to go and try to understand those root causes. So we actually went to Madre de Dios, where a vast majority of these kids that were coming from, and spent time there conducting research, and again, trying to understand these underlying causes. And of course, what we learned is not shocking. We've all heard the stories. Environmental degradation led to disruption of local economy. The communities that had been living off of the land for eons were for the first time in a cash economy. And literally, we had to do seminars where like, this costs $1. $1, like literally placing value to objects was a relatively new concept to some of the communities that we were engaged with in deep into the Amazon. But they were now subject to market forces. So having that knowledge is incredibly important. But through that experience, we realized that there was an important role for Not For Sale to play as these communities were making this transition into the cash economy. But Not For Sale was, our role as a nonprofit was a smaller role than what we had probably initially thought when we went in to engage with the communities. I'll just keep jumping. This gives you a slice of understanding of just kind of what was going on there. The lower right-hand corner is an illegal gold mine. This is what has been polluting the waters in the Amazon. They use mercury. They just use the mercury and it goes into the waterways. The communities now can't even fish out of the rivers, the natural waterways. And the gentleman in the top right, his name is Martin, who, when we first met him almost 18 years ago now, was a singular individual going out and collecting Brazil nuts. So the irony is that the communities had access to incredible ecological wealth, I'll put it that way. But the harnessing of that and the access to marketplace they were just being exploited by middlemen, traffickers, and other individuals, illegal gold mines. The women were being literally snatched from the indigenous communities and used as literal sex slaves in the gold mines. And that they were preying on this incredible vulnerability, particularly the economic vulnerability of the communities. And Martin, when we met him, told us, like, I knew that if I had stayed as an individual, going out and just collecting Brazil nuts for myself and not organizing and not creating more cohesiveness of the communities in the Amazon, that I would die out in this forest by myself as an individual, and no change would come about. And so for the last 18 years, we've been working with Martin, not only to deliver financial support through not for sale from a charitable or nonprofit perspective, helping build schools, helping provide fish ponds and local gardens, and just to underpin the community nutrition, but also to build out supply chains. And now we're starting to enter into our unique business model, where we conduct research and business development to unlock some of the opportunities that exist in the at-risk communities where we work around the world. I should have mentioned that we work in 10 different countries around the world, Peru being one of them, Thailand being one of them. So our great awakening was that nonprofits have a role in creating great businesses, and businesses should have a role in creating great nonprofits. And I could go into a whole spiel about the history of the 500-year history of doing good being placed over here on charities and nonprofits and destroying the planet and making all your money over here. And then you make a lot of money and you make a charitable donation to a nonprofit, sit on the board and tell them what to do. I don't believe in that. I think there has to be a coming together of both great business and great nonprofits. Obviously with an arm's distance, but there's some interconnection that needs to happen there, and that has been our evolution as an organization. So from that, we've created this unique model we call it the impact stack, where we provide philanthropic support to people like Lucy, Martin, Krunam at the social programming level. But then my business partner and I and others at Knoxville, we do this research and business development. And from there, we go find other forms of capital and talent. We go literally recruit business leaders to lead companies that are going to provide not only financial support back to the communities that we work in, but also buy ingredients, buy materials, hire people. So for example, Ruby in introduction mentioned Just Business, which is a impact venture capital firm that I've also started. So we realized we needed to also raise for-profit capital to help get these companies off the ground, to be able to attract the talent. So Ruby also mentioned Rebel, which is a beverage company that we started. The reason why we started the beverage company is because we knew we had to buy ingredients from the communities in the Amazon. So that's literally the reason why we started the company. It's now it was the fastest growing natural organic beverage in the history of the United States. We're in every state. We're in Target, Whole Foods, you name it, in the local co-ops around here in Minneapolis. Go check it out. It's delicious. Highly recommend it. It's good for you. But the business, not only again do we buy ingredients from the communities, which helps secure supply chains out of the regions of the Amazon we were working, but also we've been able to raise over $1 million just through the company, and that money then filtered back into the communities through some of the social programming that I mentioned. And I'll just close the loop with Martin. So I mentioned that we met him 18 years ago, and he's like, I'm going to be an individual out here collecting Brazil nuts, and I'm gonna die in this forest, and no one's ever going to know. And just before the pandemic, my co-founder and I were in Puerto Maldonado and the Amazon with Martine. And before the pandemic, over the last 5 years, we had effectively stopped trafficking out of the communities. Why? Because we had created the economic resilience through building these supply chains, building the robustness in the communities through this blend of charity and distribution of funds to support the communities that way. But really, it was the economic resilience of the buying materials and ingredients from the communities through Rebel. But Rebel is one small part of their supply chain. They sell now Brazil nuts to Costco and to Walmart. So that they're a part of these larger global supply chains. They're not reliant on us. I've also seen that through charitable work where communities, individuals leave one slave master for another. Now they're dependent, now an individual or community is dependent on a nonprofit. That we're not sustainable. We're dependent on charitable donations too, and those dry up. The communities need to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. And so I'll end with Martine, while we were there just before the pandemic. Martine was pitching my business partner and I on an investment in a Brazil nut company. So he went from being a literally starving individual going out and collecting Brazil nuts to pitching us on a business opportunity in the Amazon. And to me, that was this light bulb moment of, whoa, that's agency. He's in a position of incredible value to be able to say, I've made this transition from being in the middle of the forest to now being a part of a broader co-op of literally tens of thousands of people. And we have this opportunity that you can participate in. And I just love that power dynamic shift of now it's about you joining me, not the other way around. And I'll just say, as it applies to research and the need for research in the anti-human trafficking space, there is no greater place of need for research. I would say our numbers and our data in this space are crap. It's terrible. And that could be applied at every level of this impact stack. The social programming level, there's no wrong answer to research that is needed in this space. On a local level, on a national level, on a global level, I think our data is truly atrocious. In fact, an old buddy of mine who has written a number of books, Dr. Kevin Bales, who was the first one to kind of put forced labor and human trafficking back on the radar about 25 years ago. He'll even tell you, he'll say, I throw numbers out there, but I know they're not as robust as they can and should be. And so this space is ripe for research, and it can be at literally every level. So I would encourage you, if you have any interest in the anti-trafficking space, please get involved. Please apply your trade because we need it desperately. We do some of our own research. I mentioned the research and business development, but we also do other white papers. We'd be happy to work with people who are on the call. If there's interest in engaging and doing the white paper, we will then publish it through our channels. Yeah, I would just say Rebel was the start. We have applied that. This is the restaurant that Ruby mentioned in the in Amsterdam. We have 5 locations. Similarly, again, engaging and working with the community in the red light district, understanding their needs. The restaurant was the start. I was just on a call yesterday with our project lead or program lead and our business lead in Amsterdam. We started an accountancy, a for-profit accountancy that works directly with the women behind the windows, who are still behind the windows, and women who have decided to go to a local shelter, who have needs from an accountancy level. Yeah, it's been fun to be able to see how the model then grows into other places around the world. And hey, if you're in Amsterdam, make sure you visit because it's really good food too. So that's me. Appreciate you again having me. Happy to answer any questions or comments.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Mark. And I think we are small enough to be able to just have conversation today. But Mark, before I let you go, could you expand on who those restaurants are, who they were designed for? So
Sure.
I think that was a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So we followed the exact same approach and model that we did in the Amazon. So in 2011, my co-founder and I went and spent time in Amsterdam just to, like, here we go. We hear all these things about Amsterdam. And what's the truth? What is the truth about legalization? What is the truth about the different models when it comes to the commercial sex trade? And met lots of different people, literally met the mayor, met local NGO leaders. And there was one particular woman who had been working in the with the women behind the windows. And I say women, I know there are also men, there's also transsexuals. There's a whole host of people who are behind the windows. The vast majority is women, so forgive me. It's a linguistic slip. But this individual, her name is Toos Heemskerk, she's Dutch and had been working in the red light for 25 years when we met her. And I'll never forget, we had coffee with her, and she said, "Look, I've been working in the red light for this time, this long time," and she'd been working with a local NGO, and she mentioned that she felt guilty because she would engage and build a relationship and rapport. She's well known in the red light, and she felt guilty because she would ask the individuals she would meet in the red light to trust her, that there was a future for them if they were to go to a local shelter, and then there could be other jobs that they could engage in. And literally in the 12 years that we've been working in Amsterdam, they've actually shrunk the size of the red light. It's less than 40% of what it was 12 years ago. And the reason is because the city government and the national government knows that the vast majority of the individuals in the red light are there because of debt bondage. And that is what they did not want the world to know, is that they knew that, and they still know that. So, but there's a lot of work being done, and there's a lot of organized crime that's going on in the red light. But I'll just share a very typical story. A typical story will be that an individual, let's say in Romania, needs a $250 loan to support a grandfather who has a health issue. And they'll take a $250 loan from a loan shark, happens to be a part of the mafia, can't pay it off. Next month, it's $500, $1,000. By the time they get to Amsterdam to pay it off, they're in they have to actually pay for the window. The window has to be paid for, so that adds to the debt. And this is all illegal debt. And so there is an opportunity for them to have the debt vanquished from the record, but that's why they need a good accountant and legal support. But going back to Toos and she's saying she feels guilty. She felt guilty because she said, "I'm saying, come, trust me, go to the local shelter, and there's a future for you." And she said, "I feel guilty because I know I've been selling them a false dream. There is no future for them. There is no next step. There's a shelter, and then there's nothing, because there's no training, there's no job placement." And essentially what we've been building over the last 10 years is an opportunity for training. So right now there's food training that we do as part of the restaurants, a year-long culinary course that we don't just have individuals come out of the red light, but others from the local community who go through the culinary training. So it's culinary training. There's a beautician program that we built, and there's the computer training and accountancy training, which then lead to opportunities to work in our companies. So there's a dual layer of training and then placement in the restaurant. So anywhere between 15 to 20% of the individuals working in the restaurant have also come out of the red light. And that number fluctuates, but we kind of landed at that number because there's still triggers that lead to issues for people who are working. We have to create a healthy environment for them to work in the restaurant. But there's other restaurants who have taken on a number of our trainees as well. So if you go to Dignita in Amsterdam, it's not like the not for sale restaurant. You don't walk in there because we don't want it to be like a human zoo. Oh, where's the person who came out of the red light? That's not the point of the restaurants. The restaurant is to be a great place where you enjoy the food. And what we found is that it takes 7 visits before someone realizes that that place is something different. It's unique. And we think that's a good thing because they've been attracted to the restaurant itself, to the food. And then when they find out that, wow, this is actually a social enterprise, and there's actually people who are here who have come out of this situation, they've gone from very much liking it to liking the restaurant to loving it and being the kind of going out and proselytizing about the restaurant. So I'm sorry, that's a big long answer, but unfortunately, most of the answers that I have take a bit of a story. So but that's the background to the restaurant.
Thank you. And now I invite questions from anyone.
I have a question for Mark. Mark, thanks to everyone for your presentations. My question for you regards funding for research. So that's how we operate here. You know, we go after, we try to get funds for topics that are really important to us. And your topic is really important. And I'm wondering if you have ideas about funding sources.
In terms of funding sources, foundations, and I think there's probably I'll just throw one out there. There's an organization called Humanity United, and they've been a big
Humanity United?
Yeah, I'll put it in the
Okay,
chat.
thanks.
And if you start there, that's the former eBay founder. He and his wife started Humanity United, and a big focus on forced labor due to trafficking. I'm not sure where their funding focus is at this stage, but if you start there, you can probably branch off and find others who are funding in this space. But also, if there's an interest in partnering with us, we could so there's times where we could if you do the actual proposal, we're happy to throw our name in there to help out with to lend some expertise from the space itself, and our network is pretty vast in terms of just where research could be applied. So we'd be happy to.
And Diane, he didn't speak about CRUNAM or their work with CRUNAM. Again, it's child sexual exploitation materials that is essentially trafficked children forever, because it doesn't ever go away. But there have been some funding opportunities through, for example, the NIJ and the Justice Department, so federally funded projects and grants that have specifically focused on materials that lead to child sexual exploitation.
I see a good question in there from Julia. Happy to address that. It's funny, you know, when we first started to get into the anti-trafficking field, there's this incredible woman in San Francisco. Her name is Norma Hodling. She was a survivor herself. And we went to her and we were like, because my co-founder and I are white guys. And we went to her, we're like, Norma, is this really a space that we belong in? Should we be doing this? I'll never forget. Norma was like, there was no BS. And Norma said, yeah, we fucking need you. Where have you been? Sorry for my language, but that's what she said. Because she's like, why is it that you and she's that way, she's like saying to two white men particularly, like, why aren't you involved in this space? You should be involved. You have to participate. And so it's funny. I totally understand the not wanting a white savior complex, That's why we build relationship and rapport with the communities. That's why we build resiliency on the community level. That's not creating dependency on us, because I think that is a incredibly poor way of conducting work. So I agree completely. It's about building relationship, rapport, and healthy engagement with the individuals that we're working with. So it's funny, we catch it from both sides, and that's fine. But I'll never forget Norma just really, of course you need to engage, you have to be a part of this space. And if you look at our projects around the world, they are run not by white people, they're run by local individuals who have either come out of the situation they're in, that they've been in through sex trafficking or forced labor themselves. But at all of our projects, they're run by local leaders, and it's about empowering them to do great work on the ground. So
Mark, do you, just building on Julia's other part of her question, which was just the board, do you have plans to diversify your board? I mean, it just, based on just like visuals, it does not, it seems like it doesn't have there aren't any people of color on the board. And so just wondering about that too. We've worked on that too. I mean, it's not obvious, and it takes a lot of conscientious work on that.
It does, yeah. And I'll be honest, the board has stagnated, and we've kept it small. At one point, it was very large. And we could do a nonprofit management course. That would be or seminar. That would be good. We had it really large, and it made it incredibly difficult just to get our work done. So it has stagnated. That's true. Probably over the last 3 years, as we've focused more on some of the enterprises, and we've probably not spent as much concerted time on developing out the board. But yeah, we're always open to individuals who would like to join and diversify the makeup of the board for sure. So, absolutely.
Before we move on to Kayla's question, let me ask this of Veena. Now, having worked with a public health student, really, what other points of interaction do you see with public health, and either as a school or our direction? I know that you yourself have worked in public health, but really, what do you need from us, and also what can we do better to train our students and our faculty to better interact to meet some of those needs?
Thanks, Ruby. Yeah, great questions. There's a couple of things that I have thought about a little bit, and I think would are things that there's questions that I have, and I would love to know, and I think they are public health questions to a certain extent. One is, I think, that interaction between legal status and public health. I feel like we know anecdotally that improving status helps with population health, and the flip side too is that that issues with health might lead to lack of status, etc. I feel like one of the things I would love to know about is like research about how is it that legal status can improve health, and I think that would be really, really helpful. I think in a broader sense, to be able to I think help with advocacy work, etc. I think it would be very, very useful. So that's one thing that I think I'm interested in, and I think is really would be great and would be very, very helpful. I think another piece is I feel like there may be more that has been done, but still I know there's difficulty, especially after the pandemic with so much of medicine going online. And I think that I know that there's a lot of work that's also been done about being thoughtful about how do we work with diverse populations, immigrant populations, et cetera. And I think that there's more, I think, money in healthcare for that work to be done. So one of the things I'd like to know is I'd love to get learnings from public health about what's working and what's not with online health, and how we can apply some of those learnings to legal work and other types of social service work. I think one of the things I think a lot about is in all of these helping professions, we don't have enough funding, we don't have enough support. And although there are unique aspects of each, one of the things that I'm very supportive of is just us thinking about as a overall nonprofit and social services sector about, well, where is there some money? Let's make sure that we can use some of those learnings for us. It's the same thing that, frankly, legal aid, I think, lawyers get more money than, say, a social service agency. So I feel like it's our responsibility, to the effect that we've got learnings or have research, we share those with folks who might not be able to get those same investments. So those are a couple of things that I've been thinking about. Ooh, clarification to Veena's answers. Do you want research on the local, city, county, state, or federal level? Great question. And I'm assuming that that's with regard to the question about effect of legal status on healthcare. Frankly, I think it would be awesome, I think, to be able to do it local, state, and federal. I would imagine that local would be the hardest. So I feel like state and federal would be great. I think having like some Minnesota data on that would be phenomenal. And if there is some and I just don't know about it, since you guys are the experts, if you know it and want to email me and let me know, that would be great.
I have a question for Veena and Sarah. How is the strategic plan going? Like, is Minnesota, is this a good place for this kind of work? And are you finding your stakeholders, particularly the ones in positions of being able to influence the changes, how are they reacting to the conversations you're having?
Based on where we are, I think probably, Sarah, do you want me to take this question? Okay, cool. So we're still kind of early, like prepping for strategic planning in a lot of ways, but I think there's a couple of things to note. Actually, relatively, Minnesota is actually pretty good. Especially if you look at, there are some different funders that specifically, there's actually a funder called Grant Makers interested in or concerned for immigrants and refugees. It's actually an association. And actually, after California, we're the state that invests the most in immigrants. So there's some real positives, I think, with regard to Minnesota overall and services for immigrants. I also think it's uneven. And I think, especially in greater Minnesota, lot more need for services and more particular services in places like, for those of you who have never visited, say, Worthington, it's a majority minority city that is majority immigrants, particularly from Central America. Worthington wouldn't exist right now if it were not for the influx of immigrants and refugees into the community. But from a healthcare perspective, and this is interesting and so sad, so many of those folks are undocumented. They can't get into the regular healthcare system. And so most folks are reliant on, for example, actually a clinic that's been created by St. Mary's Church there. It's a free clinic. It is staffed by a lot of volunteers, driving from Rochester to Worthington from Mayo to staff that clinic. But that's the way that folks are getting healthcare. And so it really, I think, captures how broken the system is, but it affects the broader system too, right? Because Sanford, others that are there that are running the system, the kind of general system, they're getting folks in the ER, et cetera, who can't pay, who aren't eligible for Minnesota Care, et cetera. And so it affects everybody. But that's, I think, some places that there are issues. And I think where we're thinking also, there's a lot of different examples of what's called medical legal partnerships, kind of combinations between the healthcare field and the legal field. And I think we'll be thinking, we've done some medical legal partnership work, and I think there will probably be some discussion at strategic planning if we should lean into that. I think my questions are, you have to have a healthcare partner who has time to be engaged. And I think my worry is that right now, COVID has so affected the system that even if we want to engage in that way, I don't know that And I can understand why this might not be their highest priority.
So we are out of time, but I want to thank you all so very much for taking the time to speak with us so that we learn more about what you're up to and possible overlaps. Again, thank you so very much, and we hope to see you soon. Bye, everyone. Thank you, speakers. Bye-bye. I'll be in touch. Bye.
Thanks, Ruby.